The gunshot echoed through Nevada City's narrow streets, silencing the usual din of miners and merchants as Amelia Quinn's heart stopped for a beat. The tall stranger, who just dismounted at the end of the dusty road, stared down the barrel of his smoking Colt, a rattlesnake's lifeless body twitching at her feet. 5 years had passed since she'd seen those green eyes, that stubborn jawline since Jackson Blackwood had driven Alexander Quinn from their town with threats and mockery, claiming he'd run from his debts. "Miss," Alexander Quinn nodded, holstering his weapon with the same fluid grace she remembered. His voice was deeper now, weathered like the leather of his duster. "Seems Nevada City still got its share of dangers." Amelia clutched her market basket tighter, paralyzed between the urge to slap him or throw herself into his arms. "They said you'd never come back," she managed. "That you'd run from your debts and obligations." A ghost of a smile crossed Alexander's sun-bronzed face as he removed his hat, revealing hair darker than she remembered, streaked with premature silver at the temples. "I came back to pay them all in full, Miss Quinn. Every last one." Nevada City hadn't changed much since 1874, the year Alexander had fled. The spring of 1879 found the mining town still clinging to its glory days, though fewer men struck it rich now. The California gold rush had slowed, but the town remained prosperous enough, nestled among the pines of the Sierra Nevada foothills. Amelia shook herself from her stupor. "You shouldn't be here, Alex. Jackson Blackwood still owns half this town, and his men. I'm not concerned about Blackwood anymore." Alexander's eyes never left hers as he stepped closer, his spurs jingling softly against the boardwalk. "I've come with means and purpose." Curious onlookers had begun to gather, whispers spreading faster than wildfire. Alexander Quinn, the man who'd once been Nevada City's most promising young businessman, before a suspicious fire had destroyed his livery stable and left him in crippling debt, had returned. "Your mother's boarding house," Alexander said softly. "Is she still?" "She passed last winter," Amelia cut in, her throat tightening. "Pneumonia." Something flashed in Alexander's eyes, regret perhaps. "I'm sorry to hear that. She was a good woman." "Yes, she was." Amelia straightened her spine, acutely aware of the townspeople watching. "What do you want, Alex? Why come back now?" Before he could answer, a commotion erupted from the saloon. 3 men spilled out onto the street, led by Sheriff Daniels, Jackson Blackwood's cousin and loyal enforcer. "Well, I'll be damned," Daniels called out, hand resting on his holstered gun. "Look what the wind blew in, boys. The coward himself." Alexander didn't flinch, didn't reach for his weapon. He simply turned, positioning himself slightly in front of Amelia. "Sheriff Daniels. Still wearing that badge you bought rather than earned, I see." The sheriff's face reddened. "You've got some nerve showing your face in Nevada City, Quinn. You left owing more money than you could pay in 10 lifetimes." "I've come to settle accounts," Alexander replied evenly. "All of them." The sheriff laughed, a harsh sound that grated on Amelia's nerves. "Jackson's going to want to hear about this. You planning to stay long enough for him to welcome you back proper?" "As long as it takes." Alexander's voice remained steady, but Amelia could see the tension in his shoulders. "Where can I find him?" "He's in Sacramento on business, back tomorrow." The sheriff stepped closer, hand still hovering near his gun. "But I could save him the trouble." Amelia moved forward. "There'll be no trouble today, Sheriff. Mr. Quinn was just escorting me home after dispatching a rattlesnake that nearly bit me." The sheriff's eyes narrowed as he looked between them. "Didn't know you two were still acquainted, Miss Amelia. Your father might have something to say about that." "My father doesn't dictate who I speak to," Amelia responded, though they both knew it was a half-truth at best. "Clayton Morgan," the town banker, had very definite ideas about his daughter's associations. Alexander placed his hat back on his head. "I'll be at the hotel if Mr. Blackwood wishes to speak with me." "Hotel won't have you," the sheriff spat. "Neither will any respectable establishment in town." Amelia surprised herself by speaking up. "He can stay at my boarding house." When Alexander turned to her with raised eyebrows, she added quickly, "I've taken over my mother's business. We have vacancies." "Amelia," the sheriff warned, "your father is welcome to discuss business matters with me directly," she finished firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, gentlemen, Mr. Quinn and I have a rattlesnake to dispose of and a room to prepare." She didn't wait for a response, simply turned and began walking toward the two-story boarding house at the end of Pine Street. After a moment's hesitation, she heard Alexander's spurs jingling as he followed. "That was unwise," he said quietly when he caught up. "Blackwood's men won't take kindly to you harboring me." "I'm not harboring anyone," Amelia replied stiffly. "I'm running a business and you're a paying customer." "You do intend to pay, don't you?" A genuine smile crossed his face then, warming those green eyes in a way that made her heart flutter traitorously. "Yes, madam, I can pay." "Good, because unlike 5 years ago, I don't extend credit." The words came out harsher than she'd intended, and she saw him flinch slightly. "I deserve that," he acknowledged. "And more." They walked in silence until they reached the white clapboard house with its neatly painted sign, "Morgan Boarding House, clean rooms, fair rates." Amelia pushed open the gate, acutely aware of curtains twitching in neighboring windows as the town observed this unexpected reunion. "Why did you really come back, Alex?" she asked as they paused on the porch. "After all this time?" Alexander looked at her directly, his gaze unflinching. "3 reasons. To clear my name, to settle my debts." He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "And because I made a promise to someone once that I'd return." Amelia swallowed hard, remembering that moonlit night by the river, the desperation in his kiss as he'd told her he had to leave but swore he'd come back for her. She'd stopped believing in that promise years ago. "Promises are easy to make," she said, pushing open the door. "Room 4 is available. Breakfast at 7, dinner at 6. No visitors after 9, no liquor, no gambling." Alexander removed his hat as he crossed the threshold. "Yes, madam, and Alex," she added, unable to stop herself. "Whatever business you have with Jackson Blackwood, be careful. He's more dangerous than when you left." Something dark crossed his face. "So am I, Amelia. So am I." The boarding house was quiet that evening, with only 2 other rooms occupied: a traveling salesman in room 2 and an elderly widow in room 1. Amelia busied herself in the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner of beef stew, cornbread, and apple pie. Her thoughts kept drifting upstairs to room 4, where Alexander had retreated after bringing in his modest belongings from his horse. 5 years. 5 years of believing he'd abandoned her, that their plans and promises had meant nothing. 5 years of listening to Jackson Blackwood's version of events: how Alexander had borrowed money, started a fire to hide his mismanagement, then fled in the night rather than face his creditors. Yet something had never quite sat right with that story. The Alexander she'd known had been ambitious but honest, determined to build something in Nevada City worthy of asking for her hand. Their courtship had been conducted largely in secret due to her father's disapproval of Alexander's modest beginnings. She'd been 19 then, Alexander 23, both of them filled with dreams that seemed within reach, until the night of the fire. The dinner bell's ring interrupted her memories. She smoothed her apron and began carrying dishes to the dining room where her 3 guests were assembling. Alexander was the last to arrive, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. Their eyes met briefly before he took a seat across from the salesman. "Wonderful spread, Miss Morgan," the widow, Mrs. Peterson, remarked as Amelia served the stew. "Your mother would be proud of how you've maintained her standards." "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson," Amelia replied with a small smile. "I try my best." The salesman, Mr. Roberts, was already helping himself to cornbread. "Any truth to the rumors, Miss Morgan, that Alexander Quinn has returned to town?" Amelia froze, aware of Alexander's carefully neutral expression. "I believe there's no need for rumors when the man himself is sitting at your table, Mr. Roberts," Alexander said calmly, extending his hand. "Alexander Quinn, at your service." The salesman nearly choked on his cornbread. "Well, he hesitated before reluctantly shaking Alexander's hand. "You've caused quite a stir, Mr. Quinn." "Not my intention, I assure you," Alexander replied, serving himself stew. "I've simply come to settle some unfinished business." Mrs. Peterson studied him with shrewd eyes. "I remember you, young man. You had that fine livery stable on Broad Street before the unfortunate fire. My late husband always spoke highly of how you handled his horse." Alexander inclined his head. "Thank you, madam. Your husband had a fine eye for horseflesh." "What have you been doing all these years?" Mr. Roberts asked, curiosity overcoming his initial wariness. "A bit of everything," Alexander answered vaguely. "Worked cattle in Texas, did some prospecting in Arizona Territory, fought Apaches as a scout for the Army." Amelia couldn't help but interject. "That sounds dangerous." Alexander's eyes met hers. "Life often is, Miss Morgan, but it teaches you what's worth fighting for." The meal progressed with awkward patches of conversation, the tension palpable. When the men had finished and retired to the porch for pipes, Amelia began clearing the table. "He still looks at you the same way," Mrs. Peterson observed quietly, helping gather plates. "I don't know what you mean," Amelia responded, though her cheeks warmed. "Like your water in the desert," the older woman continued. "I remember seeing it years ago when you two thought no one noticed your meetings by the creek." Amelia nearly dropped a dish. "Mrs. Peterson, no need to explain, dear. The heart wants what it wants." She patted Amelia's hand. "But be careful. That young man has stirred up a hornet's nest coming back here, and Jackson Blackwood isn't known for his forgiveness." "I have no intention of getting involved in their dispute," Amelia insisted. Mrs. Peterson merely smiled. "Some things we don't get to decide, dear." After finishing the dishes, Amelia stepped onto the porch where Alexander stood alone, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson. Mr. Roberts had already retired to his room. "Your cooking rivals your mother's," Alexander said without turning. "I've dreamed of that apple pie more times than I care to admit." Despite herself, Amelia smiled. "Mother always said you had more appetite than sense." She wasn't wrong. He turned to face her, the dying light casting shadows across his features. "Thank you for the room, Amelia. I know it puts you in an awkward position." "Why did you really come back?" she asked again. "The truth this time." Alexander was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. "Because I couldn't stay away any longer. Because every dollar I've earned these past 5 years was meant for this to come back, head held high and set things right." "You could have written. Would you have believed anything I said on paper?" he challenged gently, "when all you'd heard for years were Blackwood's lies." Amelia leaned against the porch railing. "I don't know what to believe even now, Alex. You disappeared without a word to me. Not by choice." His voice lowered, intense. "Blackwood gave me an ultimatum that night after the fire. Leave town immediately, alone, or he'd make sure you and your mother suffered for my debts. He had 3 men with guns to emphasize his point." Amelia stared at him. "That's not," she began, then stopped. It was exactly the kind of thing Jackson Blackwood would do. "I've spent 5 years working to earn enough to pay back every cent I supposedly owed, and then some," Alexander continued, "to build a case against Blackwood for what he did. I'm not the same naive young man who left here, Amelia." "Neither am I that same girl," she replied softly. "Life moves on, Alex," he nodded, a flash of resignation crossing his face. "I understand. Is there someone else?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken history. "No," she admitted finally, though not for lack of Jackson Blackwood's persistence. "He's proposed 3 times in the past 2 years." Alexander's jaw tightened visibly. "And your answer has always been no." She met his gaze steadily. "But not because I was waiting for you. I simply refuse to marry where I don't love." Before he could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention to the street. 3 riders were approaching the boarding house, rifles visible in their saddle holsters. "Get inside," Alexander said, his hand moving to his gun. "This is my property," Amelia countered, standing her ground as the riders stopped at her gate. "Evening, Miss Morgan," called the lead rider, Tom Wilson, one of Blackwood's ranch hands. "Sheriff sent us to deliver a message to your guest." Alexander stepped forward. "I'm right here, Wilson." "No need to bother Miss Morgan with your business." Wilson's eyes narrowed. "Message is simple. Mr. Blackwood's returning earlier than expected. He'll be here by noon tomorrow and requests your presence at his office at 2 o'clock sharp." "Requests or demands?" Alexander asked mildly. Wilson smiled unpleasantly. "He said to tell you it would be in your best interest not to disappoint him. Also said to mention he's still got that deed to your old property. Thought you might find that interesting." Alexander's expression didn't change, but Amelia saw his knuckles whiten. "Tell Mr. Blackwood I'll be there." "One more thing," Wilson added, his gaze shifting to Amelia. "Mr. Blackwood wanted to remind Miss Morgan that her father's loan extension comes up for review next week. Wouldn't want any complications with that." Amelia felt cold dread settle in her stomach. Her father's recent investments in a new mining venture had left him overextended, dependent on Blackwood's goodwill at the bank where he held considerable influence. "That's enough," Alexander said, his voice deadly quiet. "You've delivered your message." Wilson tipped his hat mockingly. "Pleasant evening to you both." The riders turned and trotted away, laughter drifting back to them. When they were out of earshot, Amelia turned to Alexander. "You can't meet with him tomorrow. It's obviously a trap." "I have to." His expression was resolute. "This ends tomorrow one way or another." "What did he mean about your old property?" she asked. Alexander hesitated before answering. "My livery stable may have burned, but I still own the land. Or I did, until Blackwood somehow got hold of the deed while I was gone. That property is key to proving what really happened 5 years ago." "Which was what, exactly?" "Blackwood burned down my stable himself," Alexander said grimly. "Because I refused to sell to him. He's been buying up properties all along Broad Street, and mine was the last holdout. When I wouldn't sell, he created a debt I couldn't pay, then destroyed my business to ensure I'd never recover." Amelia felt a chill run through her. "You can't prove that." "I couldn't then," he agreed. "But I can now. I've spent years tracking down witnesses, gathering evidence. There's a man arriving on tomorrow's stage who saw Blackwood's men start the fire, a drifter who was sleeping in the alley that night. He's finally agreed to testify." Hope and fear warred within Amelia. Even with a witness, going against Jackson Blackwood is dangerous. "He practically owns this town now." Alexander's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Some things are worth the risk, Amelia." The moment stretched between them, 5 years of separation collapsing into a charged silence. Then the boarding house door opened, and Mrs. Peterson appeared. "There's a gentleman at the back door asking for you, Miss Morgan," she said. "Says it's urgent." Amelia excused herself and hurried through the house to the kitchen. She found her father waiting, his expression thunderous. "Is it true?" Clayton Morgan demanded without preamble. "You've given Quinn a room." "Hello to you too, father," Amelia replied, closing the door behind her. "And yes, I have a paying customer named Alexander Quinn." Her father ran a hand through his graying hair. "Have you lost your senses? Jackson Blackwood will be furious." "I run a boarding house," Amelia said firmly. "I don't turn away customers who can pay simply because someone else might disapprove." "This isn't about business, and you know it," her father hissed. "This is about your foolish infatuation with that man years ago." "An infatuation I thought you'd outgrown." Amelia crossed her arms. "My personal feelings aren't relevant, and frankly, neither is Mr. Blackwood's opinion of my business practices." Clayton stepped closer. "Amelia, listen to me. Blackwood holds the note on my latest loan." "If he calls it in early, so that's what this is about," she interrupted, disappointment washing over her. "You're afraid Alexander's presence will jeopardize your finances." "Our finances," her father corrected. "This affects you too. If I lose the bank, then we'll manage," Amelia finished. "I've been running this boarding house successfully since Mother died. We won't starve." Her father's expression hardened. "I want him gone by morning." "No." The word came out with more force than she'd intended. "I won't throw him out." "Then you leave me no choice." Clayton straightened his waistcoat. "I'll speak to him myself." He brushed past her before she could stop him, striding through the house toward the front porch. Amelia hurried after him, heart pounding. They found Alexander still standing by the railing, gazing at the now darkened street. He turned at their approach, his expression carefully neutral as he recognized Clayton Morgan. "Mr. Morgan," he said with a respectful nod. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," Clayton replied coldly. "I understand you're staying here." Alexander met the older man's gaze steadily. "Your daughter has kindly rented me a room, yes. I'm asking you to leave," Clayton said bluntly. "Your presence here puts my family's reputation and livelihood at risk." "Father," Amelia protested, but Alexander held up a hand. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Morgan," he said. "But I've come back to clear my name and settle accounts. Once that's done, I'll trouble your daughter no further." Clayton's face reddened. "You had your chance to settle accounts 5 years ago. Instead, you ran like a thief in the night, leaving others to pay for your mistakes." "Is that what Blackwood told you?" Alexander asked quietly. "Did he also tell you he threatened your daughter and wife if I didn't leave town?" Clayton faltered momentarily. "That's absurd. Jackson Blackwood is a respected businessman who covets what isn't his," Alexander finished. "Including your daughter. Tell me, has he mentioned marrying Amelia more frequently since your financial difficulties began?" The banker's stunned expression confirmed Alexander's suspicion. "You're in no position to make accusations," Clayton recovered. "Blackwood saved this town when the mines started failing. He's invested in businesses, created jobs, by driving out anyone who wouldn't sell to him," Alexander countered. "By creating accidents and financial hardships until people had no choice but to accept his offers." "The fire that destroyed my livery wasn't an accident, Mr. Morgan." Amelia stepped forward. "Father, please, let's not do this now." Clayton looked between them, his expression troubled. "I don't know what game you're playing, Quinn, but if you care for my daughter at all, you'll leave Nevada City and not look back." "I can't do that, sir," Alexander replied softly. "Not again." The banker's shoulders slumped slightly. "Then whatever happens is on your head." He turned to Amelia. "Be careful, daughter. Men like him bring nothing but trouble." With that, he departed, leaving an uncomfortable silence in his wake. "I'm sorry about that," Amelia said finally. "He's worried about his loan." Alexander's expression was grim. "Blackwood has him over a barrel, just like he did with half the town 5 years ago. Your father's right to be concerned." "That doesn't excuse his behavior," she insisted. "He's trying to protect you in his way." Alexander turned to face her fully. "Perhaps I should find other accommodations. I don't want to cause problems for you." Amelia straightened her spine. "You've paid for a room and it's yours until you decide otherwise. I'm not afraid of Jackson Blackwood." "You should be," Alexander said softly. "But your courage is one of the things I've always admired about you." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, Amelia felt the years between them melt away. Then she remembered the pain of his disappearance, the months of waiting for a letter that never came, the gradual hardening of her heart. "It's getting late," she said, breaking the spell. "Breakfast is at 7. Alexander nodded, understanding her withdrawal. "Good night, Amelia." She paused at the door. "Alex, whatever you're planning tomorrow, be careful." "Always," he promised, though they both knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. Morning brought a flurry of activity to Nevada City. Word of Alexander Quinn's return, an impending meeting with Jackson Blackwood, had spread through town like wildfire. By the time Amelia served breakfast to her boarders, the street outside was busier than usual with curious onlookers and gossips. Alexander appeared in the dining room precisely at 7, dressed in the same clothes as the previous day but freshly shaved. The dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd slept poorly. "Any chance of borrowing a horse?" he asked after greeting everyone. "I need to make a trip out to my old property before meeting Blackwood." "You can take my mare," Amelia offered. "She's gentle but sure-footed." "Much obliged." He ate quickly, seeming distracted. "The stage arrives at 11. I need to meet a man named Caleb Foster. He's the witness I mentioned." Amelia nodded. "I'll keep an eye out for him if you're not back." The salesman and widow exchanged curious glances but said nothing as Alexander finished his meal and excused himself. Amelia followed him to the small stable behind the boarding house where she kept her chestnut mare, Penny. "What are you hoping to find at your old property?" she asked as she helped him saddle the horse. "Evidence that hasn't been destroyed," he replied. "When I left, there was a strongbox buried beneath the foundation stone. It contained documents proving Blackwood had been threatening me for months before the fire." "After 5 years," Amelia frowned. "Surely Blackwood would have found it. Not if he didn't know to look for it." Alexander checked the cinch. "It was my insurance policy, though I never got the chance to use it." As he mounted, Amelia impulsively reached for his hand. "Alex, what if Blackwood's men are watching the property?" His fingers squeezed hers briefly. "Then I'll deal with them. Don't worry, Amelia." "Seems like that's all I've done since you rode back into town," she muttered. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I'll be back before noon." She watched him ride away, an uneasy feeling settling in her stomach. Something about this day felt portentous, as if the culmination of 5 years' absence had created a powder keg that was about to explode. Amelia busied herself with chores, trying to ignore the occasional curious visitor who found flimsy excuses to stop by the boarding house. By mid-morning, she could stand the tension no longer and decided to walk to the general store for supplies. Main Street was unusually crowded for a weekday. She nodded to acquaintances as she made her way to Hammond's general store, aware of the whispers that followed her. "Inside the store, Mrs." Hammond greeted her with poorly concealed curiosity. "Morning, Amelia," the storekeeper's wife said. "Busy day ahead." "Just the usual," Amelia replied, selecting items from her shopping list. "Heard you've got yourself an interesting boarder," Mrs. Hammond pressed, unable to contain herself. Alexander Quinn, after all these years. Amelia maintained her composure. Mr. Quinn is a paying customer, same as any other. Of course, dear. The older woman leaned across the counter. But is it true what they're saying, that he's come back to settle scores with Jackson Blackwood? I wouldn't know about Mr. Quinn's business affairs, Amelia replied stiffly. Mrs. Hammond wasn't deterred. Well, the whole town's talking. Jackson's been in a fury since he rode in this morning. They say he's gathered his men at the Silver Dollar Saloon making plans. Amelia's heart skipped. Blackwood's already back. Are you certain? Saw him myself not an hour ago, Mrs. Hammond confirmed. Looked mad enough to chew nails. Young Tom Wilson was with him, grinning like the cat that ate the canary. A sense of foreboding washed over Amelia. Alexander believed Blackwood wouldn't return until noon. What if this was part of a trap? And what about the witness who was supposed to arrive on the morning stage? I need to go, she said abruptly, leaving her half-filled basket on the counter. Please excuse me. She hurried outside, debating her next move. The stagecoach depot was on the far end of town, past the Silver Dollar. If she went there, she risked running into Blackwood and his men. But if Alexander's witness arrived unwarned, he might walk straight into danger. Making her decision, Amelia took a detour through the alleyways toward the depot. As she approached, she could see the stage hadn't yet arrived. A small crowd waited on the platform, but there was no sign of Blackwood or his men. She positioned herself beside a water trough, trying to appear casual while scanning the street for any sign of Alexander returning from his ride to the old livery stable property. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. Finally, the distant sound of the stagecoach horn announced its arrival. Amelia straightened, watching as the dust-covered vehicle rolled into town and came to a stop at the depot. Passengers began disembarking. A well-dressed couple, an older gentleman, a young man in a dusty suit who looked nervously around. The young man matched Alexander's description of Caleb Foster, mid-20s, slight build, with a noticeable scar across his left cheek. Amelia moved toward him, trying to appear natural. "Mr. Foster?" she inquired quietly when she reached him. The man stiffened. "Who's asking?" "My name is Amelia Morgan. Alexander Quinn asked me to meet you." Foster's wary expression didn't change. "Prove it." Amelia thought quickly. "He's staying at my boarding house. He told me you witnessed the fire at his livery stable 5 years ago, that you saw who really set it." Foster relaxed marginally. "Where is Quinn?" "He went to check his old property. He should be back soon," but she glanced around nervously. "Jackson Blackwood returned to town early. It might not be safe for you here." The young man's face paled. "Blackwood's already here. Quinn said he wouldn't be back until afternoon." "Plans changed," Amelia replied grimly. "We need to get you somewhere safe until Alex returns." As they spoke, she noticed 2 of Blackwood's men across the street, watching the stage passengers with too much interest. One nudged the other and pointed toward Foster. "We need to go," Amelia said urgently, taking Foster's arm. "Now." They turned down an alley, walking quickly away from the depot. Behind them, Amelia heard shouts as Blackwood's men gave pursuit. She led Foster through a maze of back alleys she'd known since childhood, eventually emerging near the church on the edge of town. "In here," she directed, pulling him toward the small cemetery behind the church. They ducked behind a large tombstone just as their pursuers ran past the church gate. Foster was breathing hard, his face sheened with sweat. "This wasn't part of the deal," he whispered. "Quinn promised Blackwood wouldn't know I was coming." "Someone must have talked," Amelia replied. "Do you know a place called Morgan's boarding house?" "It's on Pine Street." Foster nodded. "Go there and ask for Mrs. Peterson. Tell her I sent you and to hide you in the root cellar until I return." "Where are you going?" he asked as she stood. "To find Alexander before Blackwood does." Amelia smoothed her skirts. "Be careful, Mr. Foster. You may be the only chance Alex has to clear his name." She waited until Foster had slipped away before making her way toward the edge of town where Alexander's old livery stable had once stood. The property remained vacant, a stark reminder of that terrible night 5 years ago when flames had lit up the sky and changed so many lives. As she approached, Amelia saw Penny, her chestnut mare, tethered to a post near the crumbling foundation, but there was no sign of Alexander. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as she sensed something was terribly wrong. "Alex," she called softly, moving cautiously toward the ruins. A groan from behind a partially collapsed wall answered her. She rushed forward to find Alexander on the ground, blood seeping from a gash on his forehead. "Alex," she knelt beside him, heart pounding. "What happened?" He blinked up at her, struggling to focus. "Ambush," he muttered. "Wilson and 2 others. They were waiting." "Can you stand?" she asked, helping him to sit up. "Think so." He grimaced as she helped him to his feet. "The strongbox, they took it, Amelia. All my evidence." Despair washed over his features, and Amelia felt her heart constrict. "We'll figure something out. Foster arrived on the stage. I sent him to the boarding house." Hope flickered in Alexander's eyes. "He made it. Thank God for that, at least." "We need to get you cleaned up," she insisted, examining the wound on his head. "And then figure out what to do about Blackwood. He's already in town, Alex. He came back early." "Of course he did," Alexander said bitterly. "He's always been one step ahead." They made their way carefully back to Penny. Alexander insisted on riding despite his injury, with Amelia seated behind him. They took a circuitous route back to the boarding house, avoiding main streets where Blackwood's men might be watching. Once inside, Amelia led Alexander to the kitchen where Mrs. Peterson was already tending to a nervous Caleb Foster. "Lord have mercy," the widow exclaimed when she saw Alexander's bloodied face. "What happened to you, young man?" "Blackwood's welcoming committee," Alexander replied grimly, lowering himself into a chair, as Mrs. Peterson cleaned his wound. Alexander and Foster spoke in low voices, confirming details of what the younger man had witnessed 5 years ago. Foster had been a drifter passing through town, sleeping in the alley behind the livery stable when Blackwood's men had arrived with kerosene and matches. He'd watched the whole thing, then fled town in fear for his life. "I need to get you to the sheriff," Alexander said when they'd finished. "Your testimony is all we have now." Foster looked doubtful. "Ain't the sheriff Blackwood's cousin?" "Yes," Alexander admitted, "but there's a circuit judge due in town tomorrow. If we can get a sworn statement before then, you think Blackwood's going to let him live that long?" Amelia interrupted. "Alex, be realistic. As soon as Blackwood knows Foster is here, he'll do whatever it takes to silence him." Alexander's expression hardened. "Then we need to force Blackwood's hand, make him reveal himself in public." "How?" Amelia asked, dabbing at his wound with a damp cloth. "I still have my meeting with him at 2 o'clock, Alexander replied. "I'll go as planned." "That's suicide," Amelia protested. Alexander captured her hand. "Not if I'm not alone." He looked at Foster. "Are you willing to face him?" The younger man swallowed hard but nodded. "I've been running for 5 years. Time to stop." "And me?" Amelia asked. "What's my role in this foolhardy plan?" Alexander's eyes softened. "Keep safe, that's all I ask." She pulled her hand away. "That's not good enough. This concerns me too, Alex. He's threatened my family, used my father's financial troubles as leverage." "All the more reason for you to stay out of it," Alexander insisted. Their argument was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Mrs. Peterson went to answer it, returning moments later with a grim expression. "Sheriff Daniels," she announced, "says he needs to speak with Mr. Quinn immediately." Alexander exchanged glances with Amelia. "Show him in." Foster moved to hide, but Alexander stopped him. "Stay. It's time we started fighting back." Sheriff Daniels entered the kitchen, his hand resting casually on his holstered gun. His eyebrows rose at the sight of Foster, but he addressed Alexander directly. "Quinn, heard you had some trouble out at your old place." "You might say that," Alexander replied evenly. "3 of Blackwood's men jumped me, stole property that rightfully belongs to me." "Serious accusation," the sheriff remarked, though he didn't seem particularly concerned. "Any proof?" "As a matter of fact," Alexander gestured toward Foster, "Mr. Foster here witnessed Blackwood's men setting fire to my livery 5 years ago. He's prepared to testify before the circuit judge tomorrow." The sheriff's expression darkened. "That's so." He studied Foster with narrowed eyes. "And you're just now coming forward after all this time?" "I was afraid," Foster admitted. "Blackwood's not the kind of man you cross lightly." "No, he isn't," the sheriff agreed, his tone ominous. "Which is why I'm here. Jackson wants me to remind you of your appointment, Quinn." 2 o'clock, his office. "Come alone." "I'll be there," Alexander confirmed. "But I won't be alone. Mr. Foster will accompany me." The sheriff's hand tightened on his gun. "That wouldn't be wise." "Neither would attempting to stop us," Alexander replied calmly. "Unless you're prepared to arrest us both right now, in which case we'll have interesting stories to tell the judge tomorrow." A tense silence fell over the kitchen. Finally, the sheriff shrugged. "It's your funeral. 2 o'clock. He tipped his hat to Amelia. "Miss Morgan." After he'd gone, Amelia turned to Alexander. "He'll go straight to Blackwood." "I'm counting on it," Alexander replied. "Blackwood needs to know we have a witness. It might make him desperate enough to make a mistake." "Or desperate enough to kill you both before you reach his office," Amelia countered. Alexander stood, wincing slightly. "That's why we need to change the playing field. We're not going to his office." "We're not?" Foster asked, confused. "No," Alexander smiled grimly. "We're going to make this a public reckoning. Main Street, 2 o'clock. Let the whole town witness what happens." As the appointed hour approached, tension in Nevada City reached a fever pitch. Word had spread that Alexander Quinn was challenging Jackson Blackwood publicly, and that a witness had come forward with evidence about the fire 5 years ago. The town divided quickly, those who believed Quinn had been wronged, and those loyal to Blackwood, who had become a powerful force in the community. Amelia paced the boarding house parlor, having failed to dissuade Alexander from his dangerous plan. Foster sat nervously by the window, keeping watch on the street. "It's almost time," Alexander announced, checking his pocket watch. He had cleaned up, changing into his best shirt and vest. The wound on his forehead was bandaged, but his eyes were clear and determined. "I'm coming with you," Amelia declared, not for the first time. "Absolutely not," Alexander replied firmly. "Blackwood's unpredictable. I won't put you in danger." "I'm already in danger," she countered. "We all are, as long as Blackwood controls this town through fear and intimidation." Before Alexander could argue further, the front door burst open. Clayton Morgan strode in, face flushed with anger and fear. "Amelia," he exclaimed, "what have you done? The whole town's talking about Quinn challenging Blackwood in the street like some common gunfighter." "Hello, Father," Amelia replied calmly. "This is Mr. Foster. He witnessed Jackson Blackwood's men setting fire to Alex's livery stable 5 years ago." Clayton stared at Foster, then back at his daughter. "Is this true?" Foster nodded. "Yes, sir, saw it with my own eyes." "Mr. Blackwood was there himself, giving the orders." The banker sank into a chair. "Dear God, I've been doing business with, he broke off, looking stricken. He's threatened to call in your loan if Amelia doesn't cooperate with him, Alexander said quietly. That's his method: financial pressure, threats, violence when necessary. Clayton looked up at Alexander, years of distrust warring with dawning realization. What are you planning to do? Confront him publicly, Alexander replied. With Foster's testimony and whatever support we can gather from the townspeople, force him to admit what he's done. He'll never admit it, Clayton argued. He'll deny everything, and it will be your word against his. Then at least the truth will be spoken aloud, Alexander said. And the circuit judge will hear it tomorrow. Clayton was quiet for a moment. I've been a fool, he finally said, too proud to see what was happening right in front of me. He turned to his daughter. I'm sorry, Amelia. I should have believed in your judgment about Quinn. Amelia crossed to her father, squeezing his hand. It's not too late to make things right. Clayton nodded, straightening his shoulders. Then I'm coming with you. Blackwood holds influence at my bank, but I still have friends there. My word carries weight. Alexander studied the banker thoughtfully. Your support would mean a great deal, Mr. Morgan. It's the least I can do, Clayton replied. For the town, and for you, Quinn. Together, the four of them left the boarding house and walked toward Main Street. As they approached, Amelia could see a crowd had already gathered. Jackson Blackwood stood in front of the Silver Dollar Saloon, flanked by Sheriff Daniels and several of his men, including Tom Wilson. Blackwood had aged well in the 5 years since Alexander had left. Still handsome at 40, with silver threading his dark hair, he cut an imposing figure in his expensive suit. His cold eyes fixed on Alexander as they approached. Quinn, he called, his voice carrying across the suddenly hushed street. I believe I requested a private meeting at my office. Alexander stopped a few yards away. I thought a public venue more appropriate given the nature of our business. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. Always the showman. Very well, what's this urgent matter that couldn't be discussed civilized-like? 5 years ago, Alexander said clearly, you burned down my livery stable because I refused to sell my property to you. You threatened Amelia and her mother to force me to leave town, then spread lies that I'd run from my debts. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Blackwood laughed dismissively. Absurd accusations from a desperate man, he replied. Everyone knows you mismanaged your business and couldn't pay your debts. You ran rather than face the consequences. We have a witness, Alexander countered, gesturing to Foster. Mr. Foster was present the night of the fire. He saw you give the order to your men to burn down my stable. Blackwood's eyes narrowed as he studied Foster. I've never seen this man before in my life. He's clearly been paid to spread these slanderous lies. I was sleeping behind the livery that night, Foster said, his voice shaking slightly but gaining strength. I heard you tell Wilson to make sure it looked like an accident. You said, Quinn needs to learn what happens to those who stand in my way. Wilson stepped forward aggressively. That's a damn lie. Is it? Clayton Morgan interrupted, stepping forward. Just like it's a lie that you've been manipulating bank loans to force people to sell their properties. Just like you threatened to call in my loan if my daughter didn't agree to marry you. Blackwood's facade cracked slightly. Morgan, you're making a serious mistake. Our financial arrangements were coercion, Clayton finished. And I have documentation of every irregular transaction you've pushed through the bank. Documentation I'll be sharing with the circuit judge tomorrow. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Blackwood's expression darkened as he realized public opinion was shifting. This is ridiculous, he snapped. Sheriff, arrest Quinn and this so-called witness for slander. Sheriff Daniels hesitated, looking at the growing crowd. Jackson, maybe we should arrest them, Blackwood ordered, Before the sheriff could move, Alexander spoke again. "I found the strong box your men stole from me this morning, Blackwood. They didn't destroy everything. It was a bluff," but Amelia saw a panic flash across Blackwood's face. "What box?" he demanded. "What are you talking about?" "The one containing your threatening letters," Alexander continued calmly. "The one with the deed to my property, the original deed, not the forged one you've been using." Blackwood's control finally snapped. "Wilson, shut him up." Tom Wilson drew his gun, but Alexander was faster. In one fluid motion, he pushed Foster behind him and faced Wilson with his own weapon. "Drop it, Wilson," Alexander commanded. "It's over." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, unexpectedly, Sheriff Daniels stepped forward and drew his gun, pointing it at Wilson. "Lower your weapon, Tom," he ordered. Wilson looked incredulous. "What the hell, Daniels? Whose side are you on?" "The law's," the sheriff replied quietly. "Something I've forgotten too long." Blackwood's face contorted with rage. "You yellow-bellied traitor, I made you sheriff." "And I've looked the other way too many times," Daniels admitted. "Not anymore." Wilson hesitated, then slowly lowered his gun. Two more of Blackwood's men did the same. "This isn't over, Quinn," Blackwood snarled, backing toward the saloon entrance. "You've got nothing but the word of a drifter and a banker who's in over his head." "I also have this," Alexander said, producing a folded paper from his vest pocket. "A telegram from the territorial marshal's office. Seems they've been investigating a pattern of suspicious fires and property transfers throughout Nevada and California. Your name features prominently." Blackwood's face paled. It was another bluff. The telegram merely confirmed the marshal would arrive with the circuit judge, but it hit its mark. With a roar of rage, Blackwood drew a hidden derringer from his coat and fired at Alexander. The shot went wild as Amelia, seeing the movement, shoved Alexander aside. The bullet splintered the post beside them. Before Blackwood could fire again, Sheriff Daniels tackled him to the ground. The derringer skittered across the boardwalk as they struggled. "Jackson Blackwood," Daniels announced, pinning the man's arms behind him. "You're under arrest for attempted murder and suspicion of arson." As the sheriff hauled Blackwood to his feet, the businessman's composure crumbled entirely. "You're all ungrateful fools," he shouted. "This town would be nothing without me." "Nothing. Take him to the jail," Alexander said quietly. "The marshal can deal with him tomorrow." As Daniels led Blackwood away, the crowd erupted in excited conversation. Some looked stunned, others vindicated. Foster sagged with relief against a hitching post. "Are you all right?" Alexander asked Amelia, his hands gentle on her shoulders. She nodded, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "You were bluffing about the strongbox and the telegram." A smile tugged at his lips. "Had to force his hand somehow." "You risked everything on a bluff," she marveled. "What if he hadn't broken?" "Then I would have found another way," Alexander replied simply. "I came back to clear my name and settle my debts, all of them." His gaze intensified, "including the most important one." Amelia's heart quickened. "What debt is that?" "The promise I made to you by the river the night before I left." His voice lowered. "I swore I'd come back for you." Around them, the crowd was dispersing. Clayton approached, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Quinn," he began, "it seems I've misjudged you all these years. I owe you an apology." Alexander shook the banker's offered hand. "No apologies necessary, sir. You were protecting your daughter." Clayton smiled ruefully. "She rarely needs my protection, as it turns out." He looked between them, seeing what had been obvious to everyone else for years. "I'll be at the bank if you need me. There's much to sort out now that Blackwood's true nature is revealed." After he'd gone, Alexander turned back to Amelia. "I need to make sure Foster is settled safely until the judge arrives tomorrow. But after that," he hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Would you have dinner with me tonight? There's much I'd like to tell you, 5 years' worth." Amelia studied his face, the same green eyes she'd fallen in love with years ago, now carrying the weight of everything he'd experienced since. "I think," she said slowly, "that dinner at the boarding house would be more appropriate. I am your landlady, after all." Disappointment flickered across his features until he caught the teasing light in her eyes. "Yes, madam," he replied, a smile spreading across his face. "Whatever the landlady says." The following weeks brought dramatic changes to Nevada City. The circuit judge, hearing testimony from Foster, Clayton Morgan, and several others who found courage to speak out, ordered a full investigation into Jackson Blackwood's business dealings. The territorial marshal uncovered a web of fraud, coercion, and at least 3 other suspicious fires in neighboring towns. Blackwood was transferred to Sacramento to await trial, his empire crumbling as the bank reclaimed properties acquired through fraudulent means. Among them was Alexander's original livery stable land, which was returned to him along with compensation for his losses. Alexander wasted no time. With the settlement money and the savings he'd accumulated during his years away, he began rebuilding not just the livery stable, but his life in Nevada City. He hired Foster as his assistant, giving the young man a chance to put down roots after years of drifting. As summer turned to autumn, the new livery stable neared completion. Alexander's reputation was restored, with many townspeople offering belated apologies for believing the worst of him. He accepted them all with grace, focused more on the future than the past. His evenings were spent at Morgan's boarding house, often sitting on the porch with Amelia long after the other boarders had retired. They took their time relearning each other, sharing stories of the years apart, rediscovering the connection that had never truly broken. On a crisp October evening, Alexander found Amelia in the garden behind the boarding house, gathering the last of the season's herbs before frost could claim them. "I thought I might find you here," he said, holding a small wooden box in his hands. "Do you have a moment?" Amelia set down her basket, wiping garden soil from her hands. "For you, always." Alexander seemed uncharacteristically nervous as he joined her on the garden bench. "I've been thinking about debts," he began. "Alex," she interrupted, "you've cleared your name. There are no more debts to pay." "There's one," he insisted gently. "The most important one." He opened the wooden box, revealing a simple but elegant gold ring with a small diamond. "5 years ago, I was going to ask you to marry me. I had the ring commissioned in Sacramento, but never got the chance to give it to you." Amelia's breath caught. "You've kept it all this time." "It was the only thing I took with me that night," Alexander admitted. "A reminder of what I was working to come back to." He took her hand. "Amelia Morgan, I've loved you since we were barely more than children. I've crossed deserts and mountains to find my way back to you. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred her vision as she looked from the ring to his face, finding the same earnest hope she'd fallen in love with years ago. "You came back to pay your debts in full," she said softly. "Even the one I never thought you'd honor." "Especially that one," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes," Amelia said, her heart overflowing. "Yes, Alexander Quinn, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that held all the promise of their future and healed the wounds of their past. They were married on Christmas Day, 1879, in the small church where they'd once shared secret meetings as young lovers. Clayton Morgan walked his daughter down the aisle with pride, having found new respect for his soon-to-be son-in-law. Mrs. Peterson served as matron of honor, while Foster stood proudly as Alexander's best man. The newlyweds combined their businesses, Alexander's thriving livery stable and Amelia's boarding house, creating a prosperous enterprise that served travelers and townspeople alike. Their home, built on Alexander's reclaimed property, became known for its hospitality and warmth. In the autumn of 1880, they welcomed their first child, a son they named William, after Alexander's father. 2 years later, a daughter followed, named Margaret after Amelia's mother. As Nevada City continued to evolve with the changing times, the Quinn family remained a cornerstone of the community. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Alexander took Amelia riding to the spot by the river where he'd once promised to return for her. "You remember what you said to me that day I came back?" he asked as they sat watching the water flow. "When I told you I'd come to pay my debts." "I believe I said promises are easy to make," Amelia replied, leaning against his shoulder. Alexander chuckled. "You did, and you were right." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "But there are some promises worth spending a lifetime keeping." Amelia looked into the eyes of the man who had crossed mountains and deserts to return to her, who had fought to clear his name and reclaim his place in a town that had turned against him. The man who, despite everything, had never stopped loving her. "I'm glad you came back to pay your debts in full," she said softly, "especially the ones of the heart." "Those," Alexander replied, kissing her gently, "are the ones that matter most." As the sun set over Nevada City, casting golden light across the river, they rode home together, no longer pursued by shadows of the past, but moving forward into the future they had built together, one promise at a time.